Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlot Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel, and this is my co-host who I've long wished to be banned and sent off to the desert, locked away from all human interaction, Tanner Dykstra, and today we're here to talk about the Electric State. Tanner, this is from Joe and Anthony Russo. These are the guys that brought us, like, four of the best Marvel movies. I can't wait for the Electric State on Netflix.
The masters of the box office, Tucker? Joe and Anthony Russo?
And now they've become the masters of streaming. As they, of course, have made some movies with Netflix. And we're here to review The Electric State. And, of course, if you have watched this movie and want to talk to us about it, feel free to join our Discord server or leave your thoughts in the comment section below. But, Tanner, enough faffing. Enough screwing about. It's Electric State time, baby. Give me your thoughts.
Tucker, I usually don't try to levy this criticism specifically, especially right off the bat.
Sure.
Because I feel
this is a special occasion.
It can feel simple or reductive even, but here's what I want to start my conversation with. I rolled credits on the Electric State roughly 2 hours ago.
Sure.
And my overriding thought when I finished it was one of the most wholeheartedly boring film watching experiences I've had in a good long while.
Yeah.
I was wholeheartedly bored for large portions of this film.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that the film doesn't look good or bad. We'll talk about it. Isn't well acted or not well acted. We'll talk about it. But there's just a juice missing here.
Yeah.
That should largely would be there with something that's something resembling a sci-fi action comedy mystery road trip movie.
Yeah.
It has no propulsion to it for me.
Yeah. This movie has all the parts. But Tanner, much like a robot, it lacks the soul. And I'm just using that as a joke. I don't like using the word like soul or soulless to describe things. I feel like it's such an intangible thing that like ended up becoming kind of annoying for me. But in the context of the Electric State, it does have all the parts required to make a family-friendly, for all audiences adventure movie. You named a bunch of genres that the movie kind of attempts, but it does come together because I don't think this movie is like. It's not, I don't know, like, there's not, like, giant plot holes or, like, you know, there's not character arcs that are like, completely ignored. Like, all the parts are there, but you're right, it really doesn't come together into anything that's particularly interesting. It just feels empty and by the numbers, like, they're checking in the boxes. We gotta have this kind of side character, we gotta have this kind of moment. You can predict everything that's gonna happen as soon as they set up this world. And I think that is what mostly disappoints me about this, is because, well, I do think the idea of the Electric State being in this sort of kind of post-apocalyptic world where humans and robots have coexisted, but we've already sort of passed that by, and the robots are now pushed into this area they call the exclusion zone, and there's like some political tensions about it lightly, and there's some social tensions about it lightly. The world building is there for me to be decently engaged. I've enjoyed this kind of premise in things like District 9 or Overwatch has this kind of story about like the distance between humans and robots, and I think it's all there at face value. And so I was interested by the first 15-20 minutes of this movie as we're establishing what the rules of this world are, what the history is.
It's probably the best part.
And then as soon as we land down on here's our characters and here's the adventure they're going on, I'm like, well, yeah, I guess I gotta deal with this now. And that's kind of how I feel about the Electric State. I'm like, I guess I gotta deal with watching this.
I have to deal with this now. I have to deal with the actual, filmmaking narrative thrust that we are given here, not just some Netflix, or not just some pitching to the Netflix executives ideas that are being offered up here. Absolutely, Tucker. So, where do we want to start? I'll start off by being nice, is what I'll say.
Okay,
but I'll hedge it in also kind of being mean.
Sure.
So, I think this film looks good.
Sure.
Like maybe not like capital G good, but like here's a better word. It looks expensive. That is what I will say. It doesn't look cheap.
Yeah.
You can see
we know it's expensive.
Yes, we do. They put money into making this look polished.
Yeah.
Okay, is kind of what I will say. That doesn't it especially hits in those first opening, like you mentioned, 15-20 minutes when we're really getting some like world building vastness of like the lots of VFX in the world and how it has changed, and war between the humans and the robots and everything. You're like, okay, these VFX are very solid. The settings and so on and so forth look good. But then you really start to get into the film and you're like, I don't know, it feels a little like it feels a little just barren to me. It feels a little bit pointless. Like, yes, like we shot this in the Moab desert, and we have these post production things that we spent apparently 2 years of post production on.
Mm-hmm.
This film was finished filming 2 years ago. But at the end of the day, I'm just like, I don't know. There's just it's again the thing for me where it's like lacking in energy or lacking a purpose or lacking direction potentially.
Yeah.
And also, I will say it gets worse looking as it goes on. I don't know if that's actually true or not, or whether the
maybe
the
you were
wear
just
of the
burnt
film.
out by it. You're like, I don't want to deal with
certainly
this
possible.
anymore.
Certainly possible.
Yeah, I mean, I find this movie difficult to specifically criticize because I do think that it's so paint by the numbers. It's like, I don't think it looks great or bad. I don't think the storyline is particularly exciting or bad. Like, it's so down the middle, and so I'm not going to be as hypercritical, I think, of this movie as many people will be, because I do think that it is solid enough. But the one area where I will definitely praise the movie, and I think that this is more based on the graphic novel the movie's adapted from, is the designs of the robots.
Of course.
I think are actually really, really good. And it ultimately ends up feeling largely superfluous, but there are a lot of, I think, pretty interesting shots of, decayed corpses of giant robots that are like toppled over things, or like just lots of parts and lots of half robots, and then we get introduced to a bunch of different robot creatures, and I think all of their designs look pretty cool, and they're very varied, and they've got this sort of 50s, 60s Americana look to them that I think is an interesting touch for just a whole host of like brand robots.
Sense.
They're like hot dog selling guys, and
there's ice cream guys, there's magician guys,
and I'm like, that's
there's
pretty cool. I've
Yeah.
seen single examples of that in all sorts of different things, but focusing in on this one visual style that is like everything's very worn, and you can see there was color on all these robots, but it's kind of faded. I'm like, it's a pretty cool visual identity, that again I think I can credit the design base level wise on the original graphic novel, but I think they did a good job adapting them to live action. I think the robots consistently look very good, and I think the CGI for all the robots is really good. Of course, very expensive, but I didn't feel what I usually feel in a lot of streaming service movies with CGI, where it's like, we're using like the Z tier teams here to get the CGI done. There's not a lot of like bad green screen. There's like these things that I usually levy as criticisms against streaming movies. It doesn't have that CGI visual identity that I usually don't like.
No, this is the Weta team I saw worked on at least some of this, who are like the cutting edge, the top tier
Avatar
VFX studio, and the Avatar studio basically. So like I will not levy any criticisms in that park. But then you have to think about how it's all implemented into being put in a film.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like this film, it is not a graphic novel. It is not just a collection of like mood setting photos or anything like that. These images have to be constructed together to tell a compelling story. And I'm just not sure that that's true. If we even want to talk about sort of folding what we liked about it and like those strong design elements into where the failings of the film are,
absolutely.
There are moments where like where we're walking through the desert and we're seeing scattered giant robot bits, and you have this our characters are sort of coming to a realization of like, damn, the cost of this war, maybe these things do have lives and souls and so on and so forth. But then 30 seconds before that and 30 seconds after that is Chris Pratt in a dumb wig and dumb mustache being like, I like G.I. Joe things, and yelling at his robot friend Anthony Mackie, or Millie Bobby Brown being like, you're such an idiot, whatever what's his name? What's his name in the...
Chris Pratt's character? Keats.
Yeah, what's his name?
Colonel Keats.
Thank you. You're such an idiot, Keats. Well, what did you just listen to my plan? And you're like, these things are not cohesive.
Sure.
Like I don't feel like these characters are actually contemplative about any of this. I feel like you're just using set dressing from a better source material to put your, I'll say it, Tugger, very MCU-ified sort of storytelling, character building, filmic, sort of proclivities into the electric.
Proclivities, holy shit.
Yes,
that's a great word.
Thank you.
I only kind of know what that word means, but we'll litigate this later.
Well,
I'll visit the dictionary.
Like your
sensibilities.
Habits,
Yeah,
your sensibility.
I totally agree, and that is actually why even though I do strongly praise the movie in its visual design of those areas, I mentioned at the beginning of that comment that I think it felt a little bit superfluous because a lot of the cooler visual identity elements are in scattered shots, background things, but most of the movie on a storytelling level is in kind of by the numbers characters and a
Of course.
by the numbers plot line of a human and a robot working together and being friends. And to talk about the characters, and especially where this movie I think wants to have its bread and butter is in a fun dynamic of characters that you're like, oh, we're palling around, we're like, they're kind of fighting against one another and that kind of stuff. And the emotional core of the movie is between Millie Bobby Brown as Michelle and her brother Woody Norman, Christopher, whose mind is in the body of this
form
robot.
of a robot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the emotional core of this movie's dynamic, particularly between the siblings. And I think on face value, fine. Like, I can buy into that. I think that they have a decent enough chemistry at the beginning of the movie as we're getting introduced to them. But the movie totally undercuts its own potential to have me be emotionally invested by making the Woody Norman character not only robot. Okay, that's fine. Decent enough. Like crossing of humans and robots. Okay, I can deal with that. But he can't talk, so it's like Bumblebee before he learns to like speak and communicate. Which means that the emotional dynamic and relationship between Millie Bobby Brown and her brother actually almost never gets to happen on screen because she's just dealing with this robot that has sometimes human mannerisms, but mostly is just like spouting catchphrases from like a generic. Canned.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think this movie would have worked emotionally a lot more, and also I think Woody Norman would have been able to give a more interesting performance if that robot could just talk. Woody Norman's voice comes out of that robot. They're able to communicate to one another. I think it opens a lot more interesting conversations between the characters about the identity of robots and their personhood or whatever. As other characters come to learn about this, because what we're then presented with is like, I'm shocked that not only do all these supporting characters like pretty much immediately believe that there's a human boy's mind in this robot, but also Millie Bobby Brown, she buys easily into it 30 seconds. Immediately. It's insane how fast that happens, and I'm like, that should be really the first act of the movie is her coming to deal with that, but it happens on a dime, and that really shows what the pace of this movie is. Which, even though it's a full 2 hours, it's clipping through things and kind of ignoring its own character beats and like where the emotional resonance is supposed to come from by just like speeding through these things. Like, okay, yeah, we get it. I'm like, no, explore that. That's what the movie's trying to do. We don't get it. Yeah.
Especially because, and I'm not the first to say this, but in her outings outside of Stranger Things, where she was cast very young, and this character has been very clearly like her character in Stranger Things has been very clearly manicured to her acting strengths.
Yeah.
Millie Bobby Brown is not a good actress. No. I don't think. No. She is not good in this. She's not good in like the Enola Holmes films or like even the Godzilla X Kong films, which are her only theatrical outings, mind you. And so yeah, she is like a Netflix star, and so she is the young female Netflix lead you would immediately go to for this. Yeah. But she's not good. Like you mentioned these opening sequences, the opening scene between her and her brother on like this college campus because he's a super smart kid. I don't think they are very good together. I don't think they have like a compelling sibling camaraderie to me. If I really want to go there, and I'm not really sure if I do, but I'll say it, their relationship, their dynamic felt a little bit like flirty to me. I don't know if I'm off base here. Like, it felt like the moments that they shared were less like, oh, a brother and sister who care about each other but also give each other a hard time. I was like, oh no, there's something distinctly like underlyingly romantic to the things going on here, which is a total misread or a total perhaps mishandling of writing and direction here, I think. Yeah, maybe that's just me. Maybe it's just me. I saw this with a couple of friends, so we were taking the air out of it a couple of times. But I was not alone in that room feeling that. I will tell you that.
Yeah.
She's not a good actress. I don't think Woody Norman is very good either. I really enjoyed him, obviously, in Come On a couple of years ago. But here he gives a pretty, schmaltzy, poor line reading performance, I feel. And then you even look at things like Chris Pratt, who is a very known quantity at
Yeah.
this point. You tell me Chris Pratt is in this movie, I'm like, well, let me take a stab at what kind of character he's playing. Is he kind of like a petulant man-child who has a good heart, but is also sort of a hard ass? Who's like, oh yeah, that exactly, actually.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
perfect.
That is another thing that I think this movie has a hard time with. Is it has two issues that are kind of on the opposite side of the coin, but it means that the coin is just bad on both sides. Is number one, this movie has a massive cast of big name talent. You look at the cast list and you go
down the list.
12 deep and you're like, Jesus Christ, how'd they get all these people? And
Yep.
But the reality is they got all these people because 75 to 80% of them are in this movie for 2 minutes. Or they're like literally Zoom calling in because their face is projected into a robot body.
Yes, yes.
And so that is insane and totally unnecessary, and probably what contributes to this movie having such a massive budget. Is like, you don't need Coleman Domingo to be in one scene and it's just his face.
I was gonna say, you said 12th on the list. I wonder who is 12th on the list. It's two-time Oscar nominee Coleman Domingo is 12th down the list.
Yeah. And the reason why that is such an issue is because it makes you feel like these characters should be more important to the story, because like, oh, this is freaking Holly Hunter, this is Coleman Domingo, like they're gonna bring some interesting texture to these roles or whatever, and they're not giving time to. Now, obviously, those are not bad actors, but it's a point like, oh, I know that person, and that's like the point of their inclusion, which is the exact opposite of where I know the skills of the Russos to be as directors is handling massive ensemble casts of big name talent and giving them all their due. I think Infinity War and Endgame are two of the best ensemble movies I've ever seen in terms of balancing screen time wise a bunch of characters and giving them all their interesting moments. And they don't do that at all here. And that's because in reality, even though this movie does have a 15 deep cast of massive stars, the actual meaningful characters are 4 or 5, maybe. I mean, I almost don't even know if I count like Woody Norman's character as like a meaningful character, because like he's barely involved, and
he's in a tube for a lot of this.
Yeah. And so then we get this very small cast of characters, but honest to God, Millie Bobby Brown is like the only one I really feel like I have any grasp on in terms of like her character arc or her role in this world, because Chris Pratt as Keats and his dynamic with Herm, the robot voiced by Anthony Mackie, like it's an obvious dynamic from the beginning. Okay, that's fine, but they don't really delve into it because the movie is so much more about Millie Bobby Brown that Chris Pratt ends up becoming just like the punchline sidekick character. And I'm like, you really have 2 to 3 characters here that we're following, and you don't even bother to flesh out those 2 to 3 characters.
And here's what I'll say, Tucker. The film follows Millie Bobby Brown, and you say, "Oh, it's about her." It's about her. But then I then must ask, how does she change from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie? A very simple screenwriting question that every competent screenwriter would ask themselves about what they've written is like, what is our character? How do they change from beginning to end, Act 1 to Act 3? And does Millie Bobby Brown's character, change at all? It's not like she hates robots at the beginning. She is kind of afraid when the Cosmo robot, her brother, shows up. But then she very quickly learns to get along with him, as we've already covered. And then she's just dog set on going to find her brother. And then she, of course, must, turn off his life support in that climactic moment to shut down all the other robots that are being controlled by Center.
The drones,
the Stanley Tucci's evil company that controls all the evil robots. And that's it. Like, I guess she is sad, obviously, that she has to do that, but I wouldn't necessarily call that a compelling arc.
No, it's not one. No, and because actually it's kind of Chris Pratt that has the change in terms of being a little bit more open to being around people and working with
he's a bit of a loner,
stuff.
And he's jaded by the state of the world,
like
and
a Star-Lord kind of character, or
almost kind of like that. Yeah,
but you're right. She doesn't have an arc, and even that. And here's another thing this movie has a very big problem with, and spoilers for Electric State, is that it consistently undercuts its own emotional moments, not necessarily with jokes, though it does do that occasionally. But by the end of the film, there are two character death moments that are supposed to be reasonably emotionally resonant, and it undercuts both of them by just saying, "Oh, they didn't actually die.
They didn't. They're not dead.
They didn't actually die."
It's the cop out thing where like you get the emotional catharsis of having a character die, and then you also don't have to live with the consequences of killing that character off.
Yeah, it's very, very odd. What else can we talk about here with the Electric State?
Oh, let's see. Mr. Peanut is in it. He's voiced by Woody Harrelson.
Yeah.
Dumb, I think. Which is a really strange moment of product placement, if you want to call it that. Like, why is it Mr. Peanut? As far as, because I did do some research. We had a question about this in our little friend group chat this morning, so I did a little bit of research, and no, there is not anything like that in the original graphic novel. Okay. There's no branded characters in that. But in this one, this is where they added in, the Russos purposely added in this mention of Walt Disney and Disneyland being the origin of these animatronics.
That was odd. I thought maybe well, and here's another thing that I have an issue with this movie is I do think that at surface level the world building is reasonably interesting, but the movie also kind of skips all the interesting parts of like this world. Like maybe it would have been a little bit more by the numbers or wrote to cover the ways in which this identity, the differences between human and robot identity are like driving wedges between different factions and stuff, but not showing that almost at all. We get like a news montage kind of like, here's just kind of what happened. It's like a recap of how Stanley Tucci like saved the world or whatever, which by the way, like again, and this is because this is all crammed into like a 2-minute montage. I don't actually get how all this stuff was solved, or like there's a moment where Mr. Peanut signs a peace agreement with fucking Clinton.
What is that?
And then, but like, why did he sign it? Why did the robots agree to? Because like, how did they get all the robots from across the world to go to this exclusion zone? Like,
it's so clumsy to make it a metaphor that like they do a fucking robot Trail of Tears and they put them all on a reservation. It's such a clumsy metaphor that is ultimately
Mexican border wall.
Exactly, it's a clumsy metaphor of a bunch of different metaphors mixed together. And they literally call it, what do they call it? The zone, the exclusion zone. I mean, come on now. It's a lot of clumsy metaphors in that area. And speaking of clumsy metaphors, in doing that research, where I also found out the Mr. Peanut thing and the Walt Disney thing and everything. I found some brief interview segments from largely Joe Russo, because we know Anthony doesn't talk. Where he said that obviously the tone is quite different than the graphic novel, and that's because they wanted to make this like a kids movie. Tucker, do you think that like a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old would like this movie?
I mean, it's not too different from other adventure movies that I would have seen as a kid tonally. It's not, because it is a comedy. There's a lot of scenes that are focused around jokes, like side characters that are cracking one-liners and stuff. I don't know. I mean, it might be something that maybe isn't like colorful enough or poppy enough to hold a child's attention for 2 hours. But I mean, it's a family movie. Like, there's not like inappropriate stuff in it.
But my point was, and this is what really stuck out to me, and I already referenced it already, is that this film is set in like an alternate 1994.
Sure.
And so all of the needle drops and reference jokes in this film, of which there are many, are like 80s and 90s references. Sure. So I was like, these jokes aren't for kids. These needle drops aren't for kids.
Yeah.
Like you're making a kids movie in terms of tone, but all your cultural touchstones for, not to age shame, but like these 50-year-old men making these movies are like, no, like you're still using your touchstones. You're not earnestly trying to make this for a younger audience. Not that I think the movie would have been better if they were referencing TikTok or Charlie D'Amelio or whatever the fuck. But like those moments just those moments just stuck out to me as things that are like, you say that you're making a kids movie. What you really mean is that you're just aping Spielberg movies.
Definitely true. Yeah.
Yes. And to that end, the clumsy metaphor end that I was talking about. The last thing I want to mention about the interviews that are about with the Russos is They said they wanted to make this about addiction to technology, which is a small part of the movie.
Yeah.
Which is where
Well,
we are traveling across the United States. It's alternate 1994, where we see people effectively like slumped over on the street corners like drug
yeah.
addicts, but instead of like heroin or meth, they have like a VR headset
Mm-hmm.
on. I mean my eyes almost rolled out of my goddamn head, I tell you.
No, I mean, I totally agree with you. And I think the reason why it doesn't work, or for me, particularly feel like something the movie is interested in any strong way, like they say that it is, and I'm like, okay, that is present in the
Hmm.
world building, specifically world building of this movie, but none of the characters that we get to know have any particular
Nope.
relationship with that, other than
They're
Millie Bobby Brown doesn't use they're called the Neurocasters. She doesn't use them.
yeah.
And so okay, that's fine. But we never have to really deal with a character that is struggling with that, or is their life is being harmed by that. Of course,
Hmm.
Woody Norman character is like like in an iron lung tube in his like technically he's using this, which also by the
Yeah.
way, like the reason why apparently the center like has him is because like his brain is a supercomputer. I'm like, what
He's
is that? What
so
the fuck does that
smart.
mean? Like, how did
He's so smart.
I know it's a ridiculous sci-fi thing, but I'm like, that's just kind of dumb. Like, what are we
Yeah.
doing with that? But
Yeah.
we get like these characters, like Jason Alexander, her like foster father, that is like a deadbeat dad that it just uses the headset all the time. But like
Hmm.
we see him for like 30 seconds. Like so, there's
And he's a
never
joke. Like he's
yeah
a joke. That's the point. We're not really engaging. The only time we empathetically engage with this idea is when they see a random woman on like a street corner, and Woody Norman robot character like takes her jean jacket off of her like shopping cart and puts it over her.
yeah. So she's
Like
not cold.
that's not a character. That's just, oh, I feel bad for this person,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, and another thing
Um
about the Neurocasters
mhm.
is number one, I think they look kind of dumb, though. I bet that's the point. So whatever.
Yeah, they look like a giant whistle you're wearing on your
It
head.
does look. Yeah, that's a good point. But also they're like marketed as something that allows you to like split your brain power and do two things at once, ostensibly.
Yep.
What do you? No, that's not in the movie. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
What we just see is people like like totally passed out as they're like
Mhm.
doing something else with a robot body, but we never even really see them do this other than Stanley Tucci and Coleman Domingo and
Yeah,
Giancarlo
people
Esposito. They use these things, but they're using them for like military tactics and stuff. So
Yeah,
I'm
they
like,
use them to be like
this isn't like an addiction thing. This isn't like a drug thing. They're just using it for like work,
military
ostensibly.
exosuits.
Yeah.
Basically, to carry out military action while they're
But
not
then
actually
their
there.
actual bodies
Yeah.
aren't doing anything, so they're like they're not splitting their brain to like do multiple things at once or like
Hmm.
work and play or whatever. It actually seems like because it's supposed to be the idea is like you use it so you can then use the body to work, and it's like, but then what about the place? Like they seem like people are addicted to the work part. Like,
Yeah,
it's very
which
it's cleverly
sure,
handled.
the film is largely obsessed with this the action side of it. So, and again, it pays very loose lip service to the supposed idea that the Russos are putting into this film.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, sort of an original idea or something that they wanted to emphasize in this film that is not at all emphasized.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess they also try to return all the way back to it at the end with its like this outstretching
But
hand
also,
to humanity from Millie Bobby Brown, this message to the world,
Yeah.
where she's like, robots are good, and we should all be friends with each other on Earth, and we're gonna start over, and it's gonna be good this time.
Yeah.
And if you don't have friends, come live with me and my robot.
Yeah. And the reason why that quote unquote heartfelt message at the end doesn't work is because, I mean, I kind of think that she believes that, but like, it just doesn't feel like. The movie wraps up so quickly, it's hard to tell
Mhm.
what the impact on this world is. And frankly, because we skip so much of the world building, it's hard to tell how deep-seated and entrenched these beliefs about separation are, or the hatred against the robots, because I mean, like all the interesting world building stuff is crammed into a 2-minute segment at the beginning. I'm like, no,
Mhm.
like if we'd seen more impact on, well, and also another thing is like, it doesn't feel this it feels personal to her because we know about her brother. And again, that's like an element of the movie that I think is solid enough. But her family dying in a deer car accident is so random that it doesn't make like the robot threat feel intertwined with her life or anything like that until later on. And so it's just like it feels manufactured. And by the end of the movie, I'm like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I just don't feel bought into this world because the characters and the world building are so sloppily handled. And so by the end, of this review, I'm like, no, actually, this is much worse than I give it credit for because it posits ideas that I think are solid at face value, but it doesn't execute on them in any particularly compelling way.
If you're going to try and do Spielberg, and even down to like the Alan Silvestri score is, I felt like he was trying to do like a John Williams or something with what he's doing. Like if you're going to try and do that, like you think of outsized Steven Spielberg sci-fi movies. Minority Report. Let's talk about Minority Report for an example. In Minority Report, you don't do a 2-minute news montage at the beginning, getting you caught up to speed on like here's what the world is now. Yeah. You have the characters live in the world, and the audience is smart enough to sort of pick up the notes of how it is different and what the sci-fi fantasy thrusts of the film are, what the ideas at play are. You don't have to spoon feed it to them clumsily in the first 2 minutes and then never touch it again. You thread it throughout the film. Like those are the lessons you should be taking from Spielberg.
No, that's actually a really good point. Because
go ahead.
Not only does the montage thing skip over a lot of things that I think could be interesting to explore. What it means is that we don't have any mystery to this world as we explore it. It's established to us like, okay, the exclusion code exists. That's where the robots are. People don't like robots. And seeing the process of that happen, I think could have been interesting, as I've said multiple times. But then it's like they go to the exclusion zone, and what do they learn? There's robots there.
Nothing.
And they don't want humans there because there's a treaty. Oh, we knew that already too. And so
even like the Stanley Tucci sentry thing is given to us in the first 20 minutes. Yeah. When Woody Norman robot is like, I don't know where I am, but it's definitely sentry. And we're
Center,
like, yes, or center. Sorry, center. And you're like, okay, yeah. What's the further like twist here? It's like nothing really. They have his body.
Yeah. It's. I thought maybe it would be like he's awake and begrudgingly working with them or something, but it's literally just like he's in a tube and then they go find his body and
what does Stanley Tucci want? I don't know, probably world domination or something.
Hard to tell. Yeah. And again, that's because of the supporting cast, even though I think Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt aren't particularly well explored, the supporting cast is even worse, even less explored because there's like everyone gets just a couple of scenes. Stanley Tucci is the closest that we get to a character that has multiple scenes with goals or whatever, but I don't know what he wants at the end of the day because he's just like kind of like PR business
Tucker,
speak.
You remember when they just do the thing from Civil War again with the hologram parents?
That's true.
Yeah,
they do that, don't they? They use barf, Tanner.
Yeah, crazy. Crazy that the Spielberg movie they got closest to ripping off wholeheartedly was Ready Player One.
True.
Tucker, I'm gonna give this film a 2.5 out of 10.
Yep, I'll say 2.7 out of 10. I do think this is a really bad movie, and God willing, it's actually Kevin Feige that brings together the Russos to make something awesome. But
this is what I've been thinking more and more as we've been getting more and more of these Russos solo projects outside of Marvel, is that it's becoming clearer and clearer to me that especially with the Avengers films, Kevin Feige is the creative driver here. We just had these quotes from these guys working now, getting pre-production and production rolling on the 2 next Avengers films, and they're like, yeah, what we do is we like have baseball cards for the actors, and we figure out how much they can be in the movie and how many movies they have left on their contract, and so on and so forth. I was like, I think you're kind of showing your hand a little bit here, Russos, with what your creative involvement with the Avengers films is, and then there may be just guys that are on set to hold a camera. And I don't want to be so mean or whatever, but with their output, I mean, Tucker, can you really blame me for drawing those conclusions?
No, I mean, it is one of the hardest downturns I've ever seen from a director, again, in this case, a pair of directors, because I do genuinely think that the 4 Marvel movies they made are 4 of the best modern blockbusters that we have. Action movies, moments of memorable lines, great performances, moments of iconic spectacle that people put up there as like great movie moments of the 2010s. And Cherry The Gray Man, and The Electric State are three of the defining examples of corporate streaming slop that it feels like anyone could have done. And so, God, please, if there's any religion out there that is true, please, if you do one thing for me, fuck everyone else.
Any God that is listening.
Please, make those Avengers movies be good. Please, God. Oh my God. Because it's just, I have, my hope has just been draining. Like, maybe they just lost it. Like, maybe they had it during the 2010s. Maybe they lost the sauce. Who knows? But that is it for our review of The Electric State. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching to us ramble about this movie for 35 minutes. Wow. We will talk to you guys next time, and we'll be here to review the Avengers movies when those release over the course of the next few years. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.